Welcome to our webinar on how to train your dragon and the making of. My name is Ethan Maharaj. I was the assistant visual effects producer on How to Train Your Dragon. And I just wanted to say hello and welcome you guys to this little chat. We're going to hear from the wonderful animation supervisor, Kayn Garcia, from How to Train Your Dragon. He's going to take us on a little walk through the 2.5 year journey that was developing the characters, the dragons, along with Hiccup, that sit at the very heart of the film. And his work was one of the many challenges that it took to make this film. It was really a challenge on a global scale. And we worked on this project across multiple sites around the world, and it was really important to make sure that we paid homage to the amazing heartfelt characters from almost a decade ago in the original films and bring a photoreal aspect to all the creatures and characters and environments in it. I just want to remind you guys there's going to be a short Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so feel free to add your questions to the box at the bottom of the screen as we go, as they pop up for you. And that's really it. We're going to take a look at a short reel of the first film before Kayn jumps into his presentation.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Ethan, for introducing me, and thank you all for joining us today. It's an honor to share some of the behind the scenes in the last 2 years, or the 2.5 year production of bringing this to life and re-envisioning Dean DeBlois' film. So I'm going to jump straight in and take you through our little presentation. As you know, I'm Kayn Garcia, animation supervisor at Framestore. Just to talk a little bit about myself and where I came from. I'm Aussie, if you didn't catch. And I started off at Walt Disney Animation in Australia as a 2D animator. Before then, I did my Bachelor of Fine Arts at the National Art School, where I focused in painting and drawing. So I always had a love for comics, stories, and drawing, and that led me to this path. And from the closure of this studio after 7.5 years, I crossed over into the 3D world, where I started at places like Animal Logic, and crossing over into the 3D realm, where I worked on films like the Lego Movie, Guardians of Gahul, Sucker Punch, just to name a few. From there, I moved on to Framestore, where I've been here for about 13 years now. I was at Animal Logic for about 7 years as well. And then from here, I've had the honor of working on a plethora, a massive slate of great character films, ranging from Paddington's, Guardians of the Galaxy, Christopher Robin, Tom and Jerry, Spider-Man, just to name a few, and the one that we're all here about, which is How to Train Your Dragon. Just to give you some stats about the feat that this film was and the global feat it was, as Ethan was saying, this was done in London, Montreal, Melbourne, and Mumbai. So it's a global production. Dean DeBlois, our director, who was the original writer and director on the original franchise. So to be honest, I am a fanboy, and it was such an honor to be able to help him reimagine this in a new world, in a live action world. We also had our visual effects supervisor, Christian Mans. We had Glenn McIntosh, just to name a few. The production had over 1,100 artists, production and staff from Framestore, 164 animators, five animation supervisors, six visual effects supervisors, producing 1,422 shots, going over 2.5 years. So that's a mammoth feat and a huge production from all of us. Where we had to start is finding Toothless. As I said, being a fanboy and loving the original franchise and loving Toothless, our challenge was how can we re-envision that and bring that into a modern day world, but by still paying homage to the original. We all love the original, so that's exactly where we started. And we got to watch the original over and over again, making sure we understood exactly what Dean was trying to do here with the DreamWorks team. And really envision that new world. There's a character that we all love. There's a design that everyone loves. There's mannerisms that are here, but we had to understand how we can translate into our world. So one of the first things we want to do is that was a cartoony world. How can we ground that in reality? So the first class we started at as reality, looking at what creatures influence and can influence what Toothless is. And what's so great about Toothless, he's a mythical creature. He is a dragon. So we don't have one singular character or creature that we can lean on, but it's a smorgasbord of characters, everything from the mannerisms and movements of a panther, some aesthetics of axolotl and the movements, the salamanders, lizards, snakes, bats, birds, everything. And we're looking at all these little mannerisms, movements, textures, look, muscularity to help influence what Toothless can be. From here, we started off, we needed to win the confidence of Dean and Universal. So we started off doing a pitch, started doing some simple models really quickly, and we had a mercenary team that worked for about 2 months to do a small pitch to show what potentially we can do with Toothless. So one of the first places we started at, and one of the first things that Universal, Peter Kramer, and Dean came to us and talked to us about is they loved the hippogriff and the connection between Harry Potter and the hippogriff, which had very animalistic behaviors, very animalistic movements and mannerisms, but you could still feel that connection between the two. And the great thing about this was Framestore did this many years ago, and our head of animation, Michael Eames, was the creator and worked on the hippogriff. So he was a big guidance and he drove this original pitch to help sell and win that idea. From here, we looked at early concepts of how we can interpret that, how we could lean on the realisms of stuff like the hippogriff div and reality and how we could translate it into Toothless, starting to look at the anatomy. Is it got a keel like a bird? Has it got a rib cage like a bat? These are very early explorations where we started to explore that. We started to put these images in real life environments where Christian Mans went to his local park and started shooting footages and putting our character in there. We started to play with scales and proportions that felt a bit more realistic. The original was quite characterized, chunky, big heads. We're starting to push and explore those worlds. One of the first things that we learnt really quickly is looking at some material that was already out there in a live action world with Toothless, and also starting to push Toothless in a real world with those cartoon characteristics that starts to break the rules of the world that we wanted to achieve here. It starts to feel cartoony and wrong for our world. So we quickly learned that this is not the direction that we wanted to take. Here was the first pitch that we did. So after 2 months of work with a small team, this is the first movement test that we showed to Universal and Dean to say this is a small taste of what we could potentially offer you with Toothless. And the great thing is they saw the potential in this and we got the job. So from here, one of the first things and what's so great about Dean is such a collaborative director. From the very beginning, he introduced us to Simon Otto. And Simon Otto was the animation director on the original trilogy. So he came to us teaching us and sharing the information and knowledge that they learned on the original film, some of their flight schools, some of the explorations they did there, to make sure that we understood the language and world that they created, and then we can evolve from that and build from that world. So that was really great. There was such a collaborative, creative process from the very get-go, and having Dean introduced us to Simon, and having Simon be so kind with his time and his wisdom and the knowledge of the biz was a great starting point for what we wanted to do here. What we do is we build from the inside out. We really wanted to make sure that our Toothless was grounded in the real world. We wanted to start building rules for our world, and we literally build our characters. We build skeletal systems. We work out how that character is going to move. So here's starting to discuss, is it a bird? Like I said before, in the kiln, a bird has a certain way that it moves. It is moving from a single pivot point. Bats have clavicles that will move across a rib cage. So we quickly realized and discovered that that's what we wanted for our Toothless. It makes him feel bigger. There's more weight. There's more muscularity. So that was some of our early explorations. And then within that, we'd created a full anatomy and skeletal system. We had double scapulars. We had full muscular systems that worked, that had restrictions, that had rules that we had to abide by. We can't break these like you could in the original cartoony world. We had to abide to those skeletal systems and muscular systems that we created, which really creates a rule set and a language for our world that our artists will follow. We have muscles that activate on tension. We have skeletal systems that move with inside of anatomy. We have skin slide that slides over the top of it, membranes that flutter in the wing. So these are one of our first movement tests. We haven't really started diving into the character yet. We're just really trying to work out how our characters are going to live and breathe with its functionality and its anatomy. And it's really important for us to make sure that that's believable and real. We did walks. A big important part of this was walking like a panther, that those scapulars would move like a cat as we stalk down the rock towards Hiccup. That's all in informing how our character would move. And what's really interesting about what we do, we don't just come straight from a design into movement. It's a backwards and forth process. It works in parallel. As soon as we start doing movement tests, it starts informing what our design will be. We start changing our anatomy. We start subtly changing the design that will work to something that's functional, that will meet and abide at the story beats that we need to achieve, and that lives in that language that we're creating. From there, now we're starting to get believable movement. We need to find the character. So this was the harder part. How do we capture that? So we looked at the original film, working out iconic moments and looking at how we can interpret that in our world. We looked at life, the animalistic mannerisms that could help, portray those emotions that we're looking for between Hiccup and Toothless. So here we are searching for those moments, looking for what works and what can ground our character. One of the interesting things we learned really early on is here, there was that iconic moment when Toothless, sits on his hind legs and sits back. And it was such a moment that Dean liked in the original. And we tried it here, but it just doesn't work in our world. Here we had to literally break the spine and break the tail to make this work. And it just didn't feel grounded in our world. So we quickly learned that this is not the path that we wanted to go, that we wanted to ground it more in what a creature would do, what a big, heavy creature would do. So we went for something that was more like this. We looked at panthers and how would a panther stand up? We still have the same mannerisms. We're looking at a lion shaking his head, the lizard lick of the lips, the nictated membranes of a cat or a bird or a lizard, and started combining all those things to really feel like it's grounded. And this was the first test that we showed to Dean and to Universal, that they started to go to see what Toothless would be and start to see the rules of our world, and again building their confidence that this is what their Toothless would be. Early stages, but our first real development on the performance of our character. From here, we looked at every single sequence and we broke it down, doing the same process. What kind of animalistic moments we can find to portray what was happening in the original. We didn't want to recreate what the original story was. We wanted to do what Dean couldn't do in the original. He said he had limitations between that style and that world. What can we do to plus that? What can we do to ground that in reality and take that to the next level? So here's our first pass, is simply looking for references, animalistic movements, behaviors that we can start interpreting into our world. From here was one of our first tests done by Ricardo, where he's starting to look at this performance, using that reference to ground our character, starting to see how much land we're going to occupy, how big our sets are going to be, starting to feel the scale of the character. And this is one of our first performance tests where we're starting to bring those two together, feeling the character, also but feeling the size and scale of him and how he's going to inhabit that world. From here was probably one of the first tests to show you just that evolution. From here, we've done many animations in between this. And this is our final product. The many iterations, each stage we're evolving, pushing further and further. We now have our live action plates, and we're pushing this to the next level. With every little detail of the slider spitting it and spitting out, the membranes vibrating, him breathing, the eyes dilating, all these little details slowly being added and researched to find the right balance to make sure that these two are living and breathing in the same world. So I think that's just a quick example of that evolution. So from here, we're starting to get our performance. Now we wanted to make sure he can emote, and we build our emotions. Exactly as we did the body, we need to build the face. We need to think about the muscular system of how a lizard would move, how a feline moves, to make sure that we're doing the exact movement. So when he jaw tenses, the temporal muscles would tense, the jaw moves, the bone structure. So again, it's grounded in our reality and finding those languages. So everything he does is believable, and it's all stolen from reality to find the right balance that is toothless. We looked at the jaw movements of lizards. We looked at the hingings of snakes to find what else. And the funny thing was, ours is toothless is somewhere in the middle. We didn't want a fully hinged jaw. We didn't want to fully dislocate it. So we kind of set ourselves in the middle with a sort of slightly hinging jaw to get the range we needed for toothless, but still felt like a lizard feline dragon. But again, it's all research from reality. What can we steal from life to make our character and our world rules believable? From here, we start looking at performances. What I found really interesting here, we work on a facts-based system, which basically is the muscles within your face that all activate to create emotions. So we did that with Toothless, but we start looking at animals and creatures to find that. And every emotion we found was in life. Every range is based on what we could find in life. And as I searched for every emotion, we found it all in what we could see in life. And that was the rules that we pushed to Toothless. And one of these ones I thought were some of the most interesting, because we start looking at these and these lizards, and that is a leopard gecko in the bottom right. And just looking at it, that looks like a smiley, cute creature. You can feel an emotion from there. And that's cool. We go, okay, that's our gauge for Toothless. That's some of the rules. And again, grounding in reality. We're looking at, again, reality. What can we steal from reality? Where can we find those emotions? Again, these ones I find really interesting. These little geckos look like they're sad, but they're not. They're reptiles. And one of them is actually in a humidifier, and there's actually a water drop that just sits in its eyes, and it literally looks like it's crying. So I think we put our human emotions instantly onto these creatures. And I think that's what we're doing in Toothless. We're finding that range of emotion in life and representing in Toothless to make him believable and make him emote empathy that we can find from him. Again, everything is based in reality. From here, we look at the eyes. One of the biggest things we spend a lot of time on is the eyes, the gateways into the souls. That's what we look at when we communicate to somebody. That's what we look at when we want to feel what they're thinking, where they're going, and feel into their soul. So for Toothless, we spent 6 months to a year trying to work out exactly how his eyes would be. He has very big eyes that you can't really find in life. They're quite cartoony, but it's also part of his appeal and that cuteness, that puppiness about it. So we had to find the right balance. If we went too small, it felt like we lost that charm of Toothless that we all love. If we went too big, it starts to feel like we're breaking the rules of our world, and it didn't feel real. It felt cartoony. So finding that balance, we had reality of the biggest eyes you could find in the animal kingdom. We looked at human eyes for the depth and emotion you get in the connection. We looked at birds, lizards. And one of the interesting things we found, the more feline we went, the more reptilian we went, the more bird-like we went, it felt real, but we never felt we had that connection that we want with Toothless, that human connection we did. So it was a balance between the two. We actually had the depth. Your human eye has layers in it that you can see into the eye as it dilates, it moves. So we brought a combination of those to find out what Toothless is. So he still felt animalistic, but we still have that connection that we want between Hiccup and Toothless. We did movement tests looking at reptiles and the nictating membranes. That's an attribute we add that gives it that really animalistic behavior, that fleshiness that moves around with lizards and animals, the way the eye dilates, the retractingness of an eyes. Lizards retract their eyes in a lot and then they come back out. We did it subtly with Toothless. We pushed it further with other creatures, the other dragons. But him, we wanted to find that right balance that felt animalistic, but still charming and appealing. Every element of Toothless, we went through these minute research and details on every element. I said we spent 6 months or to a year on the eyes. every aspect was many conversations, many avenues of research, looking at animals, looking at life, finding out what creatures and what elements suits our creature most to the 10th degree, to every wrinkle, to every scale, to every membrane, went through its own development search to find the right recipe for Toothless. Now, every creature in our film, every dragon went down its own individual path. They are all unique in their mannerisms and behaviors and characteristics, and also in their references from life. Toothless, we really wanted to maintain that appeal and character design that we all love from the original, but the other characters had a little bit more liberty in regards to grounding them. They were quite cartoony and characterized in the original. So these ones, we really grounded them a lot more and felt like we made them a lot more realistic and had that liberty to break away from the original design a little bit, but by still maintaining the essence that we all love from the original. So just a small little peek of what those were. Deadly Nada, which is Astrid's dragon, was very bird-like in its movements. We looked at lizards and the colors we can find from life. And this is one of our first movements and performance tests done by our animation supervisor in Montreal, Mina, which I think was a beautiful job where everyone really started to see this is what our character would be like. So many research on references, looking at birds. Our anatomy again was researched at. We looked at dragons from other shows. We looked at dinosaurs. We looked at birds to find the right combination that worked for this character. And again, stealing from life as much as we can. And again, creating rules, a skeletal system, a muscle system that creates the language for this character. Monstrous Nightmare went down its same exploration as well. And this one is very much like a iguana or a Komodo dragon. It leaks and sweats napalm out of its scales. And that's another thing that's part of it. Not only do with the characteristics of the dragons and its reference from life were unique to itself, its flames. Every dragon had its own unique flame and fire and that was unique to itself. And that went down its own exploration, again, looking at life, looking at napalm and fire and magnesium and rockets, whatever was appropriate to find the right one, that the characteristic for that dragon, and to give it its own unique flavor and taste. One of the challenges with the Monstrous Nightmare is it's got plates on it. So we had to work out how it was moved. In the original, they're all bending, but here we wanted to make sure these armored plates that protects this dragon from its own flames and other dragons and battle and Vikings in this film, that it had its functionality. So one of the challenges is how can we interlock these plates? So we looked at knights, armored plates, traditional roofing systems of how we could interlock them and find a logical movement. So we subtly changed the design to get some functionality out of there. So it would still move, but still be believable to its role. So each character had its own unique challenges to make sure it was grounded in realities and the rules that we create for it. The Gronckle was one of my favorites and one of the ones that I guess breaks the rules of reality the most. It is the most comedic character in the film. And the fact that it has small wings that carry such a big character, I guess, breaks that illusion of life more than the others. But one of the most interesting things I thought about this, and I discovered in this, was we took our team to the Anatomy University in London, where we got to speak with the professors there about muscles, skeletal systems of different characters and creatures, so we could find out what worked for us. But they also had their own lab where they did super high speed recordings of animals and creatures to discover their movement. And you can look at it super slow-mo. And they did this with bumblebees. And obviously there's a huge influence of a bumblebee on Gronckle. And one of the things I found super interesting is the way that the bumblebee carries itself, because its wings are too small for its body mass, is at hyperspeed. It creates figure eights where it creates a little vortex. And then on the upswing, it catches that vortex and it gives itself lift. And they discovered this by doing hyper slow mode frame rate footage and small vapors of water in the air where they could record this. And I go, well, there you go. There's our logic for the Gronckle. So we're creating rules. We're creating a logic for it. We also worked on Pan and Tinkerbell, and there was technology that we discovered there to make her feel like she would fly and create that fluttering feeling. So it's influencing from projects we worked on before, and again, mostly from life and creating that language and logic for our character. A big influence on the Gronckle as well was hippopotamus, just the way that fleshiness moves, We're looking at bulldogs. This one had its own fat system because it's a muscular character underneath, but there's a layer of fat in there. And work out what its emotions are and what its ranges are. So every character is grounded in real life, but a huge component of the Gronckle was hippopotamuses and that way that they move and their structure moves. So that was a big influence on how that character came to life. The Zipplebacks, again, went through its own evolutionary path and its own path of exploration. We have two heads that fight like Siamese twins that bicker with each other. They're influencing snakes, lizards, turtles, whatnot. It has its own unique flame. One sets off smoke, the other one ignites it with a spark. Again, looking at what that flame would be and its own path. So every character went through its own exploration of discovery to find out what this characters mean. And this is great. One of those top left performances was done by our Melbourne studio where they started playing with this bickering action. And I always love to see this, that Dean loved that performance so much that end up going in the film. So as we're exploring and finding out what our character is, it's also informing of what that would be and influencing Dean's decisions on how his character would be. From here, in parallel to this development of our characters, we're also working on previs and re-envisioning the story. So we looked at the original sequence, we're breaking up, we're prevising it up, making sure we're still paying homage to what that story is, but grounding in reality. Our dragons are trapped, they're restrained by their environments. We introduced the chains. It's bigger. We wanted to make it more cinematic. How's that going to feel? Where, the characters are fighting each other. The reference we looked at this was dogs, cats fighting big dogs and lizards fighting other lizards. And how could that be? This is the David and Goliath moments and finding that story. So our previs is on the left, and then you can see the final on the right for just a small taste of this, the development that goes into this. Now, one of the biggest components of this film, one of the first things that we realized at the beginning is what's going to make or break this film is if our characters, CG characters, and our live action components can live together. We know that we can do cool characters and creatures. We know we can get great performances from actors, but can we get them to live in the same world, to breathe and connect to each other? So there's multiple different approaches we learnt and explored and used to create that. And one of the most important parts of this film was Hiccup needs to fly Toothless and how we're going to do that. So we built gimbals. And what we did to do that, we first started off with creatively. What flights do we need? How does Toothless fly? What cadences, what story movements do we need for our story? He flies, they're learning to fly together, they're getting chased by Red Death. Every nuance and every flight we creatively work out. From there, we start working with the SFX team who are going to build robotic gimbals, robotic dragons for our performers to ride. So these were our first prototypes of digitally thinking about how we're going to do that. They're creating gimbals, which is robotic moving dragons, and then we start fabricating and putting our dragon on top of it and working out how to optimize that movement. From here, we're digitally working out on those movements. What are the restraints of the actuators, the gears the robots can do, and how we can optimize that and get as much movement as. Gimbals have been used in many films for quite a long time, but what we wanted to do here is to plus that and add as many movements of articulation. It's not just a moving base, which is the flying cadence of our dragon flying and the muscularity. We've also got that opposing action from the head, how he banks each way, how the movement is, so we can get multiple points of articulation. From here, we start putting our cycles onto this gimbal. It's all digital. It's all theoretical at present. We're putting on and starting to work out what the limitations of the gimbals are. The gimbals have speed limitations. They have rotation limitations. So we want to maximize our performances within the limitations of the gimbal. So we're digitally starting to explore that one. Now, this was probably one of the most geekiest moments in my career when this was done during the strike. And we were spending all this time, 6 months to a year, prototyping and working out how we're going to do this. And then this is the first video that we saw of the SFX team fabricating and making our dragon. This is the neck of Toothless, and we're starting to see that articulation and go, wow, that's really cool. This is our movement starting to come to life. And then from here, second bit, this looks like something out of the Matrix to me. It's a giant robot. As a geek, I geeked out. Having your own remote control dragon is every kid's dream. So when I saw this was really exciting. We could start to see our movements on the right being reproduced on our robotic dragons, our gimbals. So that was a really exciting moment. Now, one of the key components that I feel for the success of this, not only do we have the cadence and movements that our dragons were doing, so we could make sure that we could attach our characters to it with believable movements, but we also had the ability to wardle, to remote control this. So we weren't stuck to just a specific movement. We never did bespoke movements for the characters. Well, we did, but we didn't use it. What we did is we have cycles. And what was really cool about this is on the day, we had the ability to find what Dean wanted, to react to what Mason, the performers, Hiccup was doing on the day. So we had the cadence of our cycles, but we had the ability to remote control it, to bank right when we need to, bank left when we need to pull up, to slow it down, to speed it up. So then we can react to when Dean would say, okay, I want you to now bank right after Hiccup says this. Well, now Hiccup is going to pull the reins to make Toothless turn, and then we'll turn a beat after. And this subtlety, I think, really gave it an organic movement, that they weren't stuck at this robotic movement, that they were both reacting to each other. We would have Toothless react to Mason's movement by the delay in reaction, and would also have Mason react to Toothless's movement by having the flight under the, and also us pulling up quickly as it stops. And then Mason would have to react to the action. And I think that really gave us genuine performances and gave us the freedom to find what the shots were needed on the day and react to what Dean wanted. So from here, this is what it looked like. This is what our setup was on the day. We had top left corner, we've got Mason on our gimbal that has a fabrication of Toothless on there. We have lights going past, we have wind machines, and what we have is what we call the control panel, which is the SFX team of Pete and Aaron. Pete's on the mixing board, blending in the cycles that we have already predetermined for this shot. Aaron is on the side, war dooring and remote controlling to the direction that we needed for the show and how we had to find. All these elements together gave us a really fluid experience of having a genuine connection between a digital, a make-believe character, and our real performer, Mason. Here is an example of the process we went through. Our top left is our previs. Before anything is done, we have reinterpreted the whole story and prevised out the whole movie to what Dean wants. Reinterpreting his original, but grounding it in reality, taking it to that next level, making it more cinematic. On the top right is the second stage. So we've gone to shoot. With all this planning has come to fruition, and we have our gimbal shoot play. Now, this was a turning point. You know, a few weeks in after doing our gimbal shoot, Wyatt Smith, our editor, would do rushes showing this edits. And looking at this, I think was like a eureka moment for us all when we looked at that and go, oh, I can see our dragons attached to Hiccup. I can see the movements there. It really already, without seeing our dragons there, I feel like he's flying through the air. So that was a really exciting moment to see all that planning and research is starting to pay off. Down the bottom left is what we call post-viz. Now that we've got the edit that we're looking at, we're going to put our digital characters in there really quickly and roughly to block out the story. And then the bottom right, I've gone too forward, let me go backwards. The bottom right is the final product. So it shows you we basically create the film 4 times, and each time iterating, each time re-editing, each time evolving it to the next level. So it shows you there's a lot of time and thought that goes into every stage of this process. Here is our sumo wars. So we had lighting effects that would give us dappled lights and movement as we're flying through with wind machines. Again, another element of ground and reality. We had different challenges. We had challenges where Toothless is flying and Hiccup are flying up towards the clouds like Icarus, and we wanted him to really feel like he was flying up. So we put a wedge on the gimbal to really give him that inclination. So Mason really is hanging there. So he's not pretending, he's hanging there to give us really believable, tangible shots. Other challenges we had was the disconnection of our characters. So we used traditional wires to give us Mason falling from the ground, from the sky, disconnecting from Toothless. We looked at that. This ended up not doing what we wanted to. So we use that as reference and we end up going full digital in this moment. So throughout the film, hopefully we're seamlessly moving from live action components to digital components to achieve what was needed on the day or what was needed for the shot, sorry. Other challenges we had were barrel rolls. So we made this, which we called the rotisserie rig, which literally was a rotisserie that spinned a rig where Mason was actually attached to, and you could physically see him spinning. And what's brilliant about here, he's really holding on. You could see the secondary action of his hair, and he's holding on. So now when we add our characters and we move it through our digital world, they really feel like they're connected. He really is barrel rolling. Again, another tool that we use to really ground them all together and make it a believable performance. And this was done for every shot where we have our live action component. We're going into full digital. And throughout the sequence, we're blending in and out from real life to digital components to give you a hopeful seamless connection between our worlds. One of the other ways of a connection was our performances, and we worked really closely with Stitches and Glue, puppet teams, and Tom Wilton, puppeteer, to give us performances on set that Mason could perform with, where Bill Pope, cinematographer, could frame to, and we had something genuine to connect to. If we couldn't connect our two characters together, no one's going to buy this film. Their connection is vital to this film. It's the most important thing. So having this was vital in that process. Every shot here was pre-planned in animation, working out where our characters need to be, a rough blocking of what that performance would be that would help inform the puppeteers, would help inform what Mason needed to do. So then from there, it evolved in plus. And what I thought was so interesting and iconic about this is that we had a very genuine connection. Mason could connect them. We're not just using tennis balls. We had that thing where he's generally performing with. Tom gave us a really heart-filled performance where these two were real characters in a real shot. And I think that was vital and key to giving a successful connection between the two. As I said before, we did performances to help inform it. And we have a proprietary in-house tool called Firesight, which gave us the ability to use our animations, put it on an iPad, and virtually put it on set. So you could see here, we're able to show the puppeteers, we're able to show the performers, Mason, we're able to show the cinematographer, Bill Pope, what performances we want to achieve, how much mass and land it's going to take up, what kind of speeds they're going to move to help inform their performance. And from there, it evolves. You know, they bring their own nuances, they bring and add to it. But each stage is really thought out and really planned to make sure that when we get back into digital, our characters are going to fit in there. They're going to take up that mass. They're going to move at the right speed. And most importantly, they're going to connect with our performances because they're actually there. They're actually performing each other. So this was vital in that connection. And it was a great synergy between different departments of puppeteers and SFX and cinematography, everyone coming together to create something that is connected and unique. Here's an example of one of our most iconic sequences when Hiccup reaches out to touch Toothless. And for this, I thought what I learned a lot being on set was the subtleties that Tom was giving us in his performances, the littlest of head tilts, the small pedal lifts, was already giving us such an emotion and such a connection that it showed me that less was more. And then our performances that we needed to do the same. We needed to find the right subtleties. Every head movement matters. Every eye blink means something. Every twitch of a nose and every placement it has is really important. So this was really important to see that connection and that subtlety that we're getting between Mason and Tom was something that we needed to evolve from and replicate. So it was a very revolutionary and informative moment for me to see that what we could learn from those subtleties. And here's a great example, one of my favorite shots of the connectivity of Tom and Mason performing together. And it really felt like they're connected. And it gave us the ingredients for us to put in Toothless and to really feel like they're pushing each other over because Tom is pushing Mason over. And then we can really push them over. There's no make-believing here in that regards. There is a genuine connection. And I feel that shot really feel like they live and inhabit the world together. Other tools we use was resistance. You know, we have puppets and we have real restraints on there. So Mason is generally pulling something off. He's not pretending. Again, whatever we can use, whatever tools and methods we can do to make it feel believable and grounded in our world. We use simple things like mantronic puppeteers of Tom and the team holding the puppet so Hiccup Mason could jump or something. And I thought this was really successful. It's a simple puppeteer with basically a yoga ball in the bottom, and you can feel that absorption when Mason jumps on there. And it gave us a real genuine movement to feel like they're connecting. Again, we're using Farsight to make sure we have the right height and the right measurements for the puppeteers so that Mason is jumping on Toothless that we can retrofit in there. We did that with Mason and Astrid dismounting. Again, same technology, and it worked really well. They were generally being carried out by the puppeteer teams on a puppet that is the same scale. It's been fabricated from our digital models. It's the right dimensions, and we have the right height, and that gives us a really genuine connection and moment between the two. Every puppet had their own complications and challenges, and the Gronckle is one of our first tests done by Maya on finding Gronckle, and here we had its own performances of what this character could be. But here was a really good collaboration with the stunts team. After us doing the tests, we'd give this to Roy and the stunt team, and they'd start to planning out and rehearse what this could be and work out how they would be able to physically achieve this with the live action stunt team and performers, and starting to explore what we did here. And this is one approach that they came up with, and this starts evolving what the next approach is. And then on the day, we found out it was a connection between all of them, having the performance that we already preconceived, and then having, in this instance, we did use the ball and a stick, but we had farsight, that we knew the timing that we already wanted. We knew where that needed to be. So it gave the performer something to use and to work with. And here, the performance had the right eye line, they had the right timing, so we could interact that with. We had things moving over with little explosions. Now we're digitally bringing that all together, and each day you can see it's evolving. It's getting more complicated. It's getting more sophisticated. And again, it's feeling really grounded in that world. There's a genuine interaction between the props in the set and the character that, again, grounds it. Again, all this research, this planning, it really pays off, and there's different methods for each character. The Zibblebacks, having such long necks, we had to find unique puppets for them. And Stitches and Glue came up with these cool backpack rigs that had cranes that give us the height that we needed to make sure that we had the proper eye lines, the proper framing that could interact with them. They were chasing our characters again, pushing Toothless down and Hiccup down, sorry, giving interaction. And here was just another one of the tools that we used with Stitches and Glue, the stunt teams, the Farsight from our tests in-house, all coming together to create something that's quite unique and genuine. And it's really fun to find what challenge and how to solve them. And they all have their own unique challenges and unique ways of solving those problems. And here you can see that all come together, which again gives us the right eye lines, the right heights, the right performances. And each level it's evolving, getting better and better. Here, again, effects. I'm not talking about effects much, but the effects and the smoke and the spark is such a huge component of the character in this world that, again, every element comes together to bring something that is believable. The Monstrous Nightmare had its challenges. We had a huge head for this one. And I think here, what I find was interesting is Gerald, stoic, having something to hit. This one shot, we didn't actually hit a puppet. And to be honest, when you see the final, I think that was the least successful. I think all the other shots really felt like there was a connection. Here's our animation part. We could feel that connection between them. Still think the next shot's cool, but that hit just never quite felt like it hit as hard as the others because we didn't have something there to connect with. And here is that flame, which is such a good, the effects team on this show went above and beyond to bring the character of the fire and the explosion and the destruction in this world, all these elements coming together for each unique character and challenge. The Terrible Terrors, and this is Sarah, one of the puppeteers, who made this little puppet with our puppeteer through to give us reference, give our performers something to interact with again, give our cameras something to follow and to plan out. And here you can see us intertwining between what the puppets gave us to our final shots, which was done by Nick Topolti and the Melbourne team, which again, I thought was really successful and just another example of the different puppets we used and the different tools to solve those problems. Not the Monstrous Nightmare, Red Death, which was the biggest character in our film, probably one of the biggest characters that Framestore's ever done. It had little elements that we had to interact with. We could not make a puppet of that scale, but we had Snotlout interacting on the brow and the eye, and we made a puppet eye that you could see he's physically climbing on, he's physically hitting. So then we're cutting to that, he's generally connected to something, and then we generally find that connection. So each dragon has its own challenge, and we've solved it with a collaboration with SFX and everyone involved in that process. The Monstrous Nightmare mouth. Astrid jumps into the mouth and interacts with her mouth, smashing up. So we had a movable platform that would tilt up. So she generally was hitting teeth and breaking it. She generally was sliding through and connecting through it. And that gave us that general performance. Again, we're not making up, we're not pretending. She generally is interacting and generally hitting things that gave us all the ingredients to give us a genuine connection. That's just some of the examples of the tools we use. Now, this is me in my sexy mocap outfit using the Framestore Capture Lab to help work out and plan what some of these challenges would be. So early on, we're getting down in suits. We're testing them out to see if they would physically work digitally before we're even getting on set, using Framestore's tools to help us explore what we could use on set. So this was really fun and very useful in trying to work out what tools and what actions could actually work, and also fed a lot of our previews. We wanted our previous team to focus on our characters, our creatures, but we could fill our backgrounds and dragons with some mocap to help fill that in to make it feel believable, because we wanted in the end to be live action components. So that was a lot of fun. Here is the stunt choreography team using some of their examples of what they did using our characters and some of the tools for that interaction. In this moment, Gobber gets picked up by the Gronckle, and here they are doing some of their first tests and rehearsal, and we're testing by blending into our animation to see if it's going to work. So some of our early tests of performance and stunt interaction. Again, another example of great collaboration in the whole film process to make sure we're getting exactly what Dean wants story-wise and achieving those artistic challenges together. Each moment, the stunt choreography team would go rehearse out a lot of our points, and I always found this really cool when we'd block out something digitally, looking at what we could do, and then I see the stunt team plus it and pull something off, and then pull off even better some of the things that we're digitally doing. So that's really exciting to see what they do. And again, each stage is evolving, getting better and better, and learning and growing from each other to what the final product would be. So again, another example of the great collaboration throughout that film production. The monster of a set is the Red Death that I spoke of before, who is a gigantic character and had different separate tests. We had to slide sets. We had Snotlout sliding down the nose, which we basically had a giant half pipe. We had the eye, which I showed you before, which we made its own eye set to interact with. And then we dive into the mouth, where we had Astrid in there. We had the ground, where he was trying to squash fish legs. But this in itself had different challenges that we had to solve with different methodologies. Now we bring that all together. This is probably one of the most complicated shots in the whole film, where we had multiple takes of gimbal shots. We had to bring them all together, blending in and out of CG characters into our live action gimbal shots, seamlessly bringing them all together as we fly around this huge digital environment. So just an example of bringing all those elements together to probably be one of the most complicated shots on the production, which was executed beautifully by our Montreal team. Now, I will talk about animation and story until till the end, but I am only a small component of this whole process. Not only did we create all these characters, we created these whole worlds. We scanned the Faroe Islands and digitally recreated them all. So nearly most of the shots in the film were all digital. It gave us the freedom to do what Dean wanted. We weren't restricted to live action plates of environments. We actually replicated that all digitally. We built the arena at Belfast at Titanic Studios, but then everything outside of that was digital, the whole Berk Island. So here's a great example. This is all digital, but in the car park, as you can see at the end here, we built the whole stadium, which could fit up to 400 extras, all our dragons in the front, in the middle there, and then built the whole Berk of Island around it. So it was creating full digital environments. So this was a huge feat. And our environments team and effects team went above and beyond to create a world for our characters to inhabit. Fire was one of the components as well, and blending those worlds together. We have giant digital characters and flames, but wherever possible, we like to try to get live action components in there. We've created boats with stunt people diving off and seamlessly blending that into our digital components in our digital world to hopefully seamlessly bring those worlds together. Fire was a huge component of every character, which I've mentioned a few times before, but Red Death, the biggest of all, was highly influenced over rockets, and that was a character in itself, and it was. Now, not only did we create and build all these worlds, but we destroyed them. and the effects team did a fantastic job in that. And these were some of my favorite shots of seeing Red Death, which to me is Godzilla on steroids, destroying these beautiful worlds that we created. And I'm going to finish on one of my favorite shots in the whole production. And when I saw this in IMAX with John Powell's soundtrack, a score in the background, I thought this was breathtaking. And as all these elements come together to create a epic shot. So I hope you enjoyed my talk and that I've rambled on. If you do like what I have to say here and you want to find out more about this show and many other shows that Framestore has done, please have a look at our YouTube page where there are many behind the scenes on many of the films that we've worked on before.
Thank you, Kayn, for the fantastic presentation, and thanks for joining us.
Cool. Thank
Have a
you,
good rest of
Ethan.
your day.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Take care. Peace.